Welcome to Gunship.
Now,
okay, cool. Super.
Daniel will speak about Quaxe.
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 Yeah, pun intended. So I'm sorry for my voice. I'm terribly sick. If you don't understand what I'm saying, please interrupt me. I'm a relative newcomer to Haxe. So let me tell you where I come from, because it's an important point for the rest of the talk. So I used to work for Netscape long ago, so the Mozilla people who are right behind this are my friends. I'm an old-time Mozillian. And I've been also involved in the web standards, CSS and HTML for a long, long time, almost 20 years. And I'm the author of two editors called Blue Griffin and Blue Griffin EPUB, that are cross-platform WYSIWYG editors for the web on one hand, and EPUB 2, EPUB 3 electronic books on another one. And I discovered Haxe only a year ago, I guess, a year and a half ago, by pure chance, because a friend in Bordeaux mentioned it. And I was deeply surprised, because after almost 8 years of existence of Haxe, I think, I never, sorry? 10, okay, 10. I never heard of it before, which is, I mean, there are 450 kilometers away from here. That's a bit strange. So I was deeply surprised by Haxe, and I became highly interested in it, because this is the tool I have. So this is the EPUB editor. It's a standalone application working on Windows, Linux, and OS X. And it's written entirely in Zool and JavaScript with a little bit of C++. So as I said, I'm an old-time Mozillian, and this was pretty easy to do, actually, using Chrome-level JavaScript and Zool. But Mozilla is retiring Zool slowly, but surely. I mean, in the long run, Zool is going to die. And I'm looking for a replacement for Zool. And that is not easy at all. So, in terms of desktop frameworks, and I'm sure this collides a little bit with the talk from TiVo. I'm sure you had probably the same interrogations in the past. You have these main frameworks available on the market. You have Visual Studio, but it's Windows only. Everyone knows it. You have Xcode and all its environment, but it's Apple only. You have Qt. Qt is fairly cross-platform. WS Widget, less known, but it's also cross-platform. You have Zool in the Mozilla environment. And you have Adobe Air that is almost ubiquitous, but it's a heavy runtime. It has a lot of issues, a lot of performance issues, and I mean, so many problems that I can count them all. On mobile, it's about the same. You have PhoneGap, Air, this kind of environment based on Cordova. You have Xcode, but it's only on iOS, so iPad, iPhone, iPod only. Qt Mobile is a good implementation of Qt. It's almost entirely compatible with Qt itself. Accelerator, that I discovered just looking for it, but almost nobody knows about it. And Visual Studio also for Windows Phone. But it's limited to Windows. So if you take a look at these two slides, I mean, the intersection is pretty simple. It's called Qt and Adobe Air. You have only two solutions that are ubiquitous on mobile and desktop, cross-platform, allowing you to develop one application for all. That's pretty limited for a market of billions and billions of platforms. So the fragmentation is far too high, and the technical solutions are far too weak. The runtimes are heavy. If you want to distribute an application based on Adobe Air, for instance, Adobe Air itself is pretty painful. The application you're going to release, to distribute, is heavy usually buggy. I mean, the bytecode is buggy. There are problems in it. It's absolutely awful. One of my main issues, you just cannot reuse an existing C++ based library. And I'm using dedicated XML parsers, XSLT parsers, stuff like that, XSLT processors, sorry, that are written in C++, there are dilibs on OS X, and I just can't reuse them because it's not doable. You cannot have a native-like UI. I mean, you all guys know that on Haxe you have, what is it called, Flixel in the Haxe world to do some UI, but it's very game-like, it's not native, and it's very difficult also in Flash, WBR, in PhoneGap to have native-like UI. I mean, you have the plus that your UI looks the same on all platforms. But the minus, for instance, if you're on OS X people are used to have a UI that is really Apple's UI, and you don't want something else. Another issue, Qt and Qt Mobile still require writing your code in C++. You have a few ways to write your code in another abstraction language, but it's still complex and the learning curve is pretty steep. It's not an environment you can master in just a few weeks. It's not doable. And QML, for instance, that is the solution that DGA proposed for Qt to write to write applications in a simpler way, is a very convoluted solution, to say the least. I mean, it's we have a word in French. It's capillotracté. It means I just don't know. They imagined it. It's crazy. On the other hand, there's Haxe. And Haxe is a pretty successful solution. So for 10 years, I'm sorry, not 9. But from my perspective is that it has a few issues. It has a too strong affinity to gaming from my perspective. For instance, I'm looking for UI solutions and there are no native UI solutions in Haxe. Just because you guys have never been interested in it. So that's not a problem, but for me it's an issue. The community is pretty alive. I mean, there are people around the whole world. Wait for the but. So the community is alive, and there is some press recognition, and I'm saying some because I'm going to highlight that a little bit. It compares to native through C++ and Java. There's dead code elimination, which is absolutely great, but again, no native UI. And this is my main issue. So I wanted to do the best of all worlds. Quaxe is meant to be a product I'm going to use for dogfooding, because I want to redevelop my apps based on Haxe instead of Zool plus JavaScript. And I want also to sell it. I mean, I want to build another business based on it, and I already started it. So it's going to be an application development environment based on Haxe and Qt or Qt Mobile, depending on the platform you target. But it's, of course, multi-platform. So you will have native apps through HXAPP with almost native performance, which is cool. And, of course, you will be able to link to dilibs and SOs on Linux and everywhere, allowing to reuse proprietary libraries that you use in your own company. I'm sure TiVo has proprietary libraries that you'd love to reuse. So my requirements for Quaxe are being able to write native apps without having to learn a new complex language. So on the big quotes, scripting side, Haxe seems to me a perfect solution. It's close enough to JavaScript that you don't really have to learn something new if you already know JavaScript, which is perfect. I want the applications to be highly dynamic. For instance, in Zool or HTML, you can manipulate the DOM of the document, and if you insert something in the DOM, your UI or your document is going to be dynamically modified immediately. If you insert a button, your button will appear immediately, just modifying the DOM of the document. In native UI, you usually cannot do that. I mean, if you have a native iOS application, as soon as your code is compiled and run, there's no way you can insert an element into your UI without creating the Objective-C object and inserting at the right place. And I want to do that without having to touch to Objective-C or C++ whatsoever. I just want to create an HTML element and plug it into my DOM tree, and done. So everything will be done through Qt, but above Qt, you will use only HTML5. So I'm going to show you an example. It's going to be much better for an example. And all the style of your UI is going to be done through CSS. I mean, I have some expertise of CSS, and it's going to help. And I hope to benefit from both Qt and Haxe communities, but we'll see. So let me show you precisely what I want to do. So this is, sorry, I just could not do a demo right now because my tree is busted at the time being. But this is a real example. What you have here is, I don't see the mouse. What you have here is really something built from the HTML5 example. So you have just a plain HTML document with a title, and I'm assigning a width and a height to the body, and I have a button inside my body. And it creates an OS X application of the given width and height with the button inside. So don't misunderstand that. It's not a web browser. This is purely native. You have a native UI container, which is the window, and inside you have only a native button. There's nothing else. So it's extremely lightweight. It's extremely simple and fast to build. And if you know HTML5, you can have a very simple standalone native application in minutes, which is pretty cool. I can show you another more complex example. So my goal is to have some UI completeness. I mean, offer whatever the platforms allow to offer. For instance, you can have a drawer on OS X. I want to offer drawers. We'll have that through Qt. So here, the example is a little bit more complex. You have a title. You still have the width and the height for the body. But you have a class on the body, for instance, saying class equals full screen button. And that is translated through Qt into enabling the green button of the window to be a maximized button, the real OS X maximized button. If you're on Yosemite, for instance, click on the button will go full screen, and if you alt-click the button, it will go maximize only. It's purely native. Then you have a div with a few HTML5 buttons inside, and one of these buttons has a flex attribute. And as you see on the first line of the window, the flexing button is flexing inside. You don't have to deal with the width. You don't have to set CSS stuff to maximize that. That flex attribute comes from Zool, from Mozilla Zool, and it's so that simple that I wanted to implement it in HTML5. The next button is flexing. The foo button is flexing because it's alone on its line and there's no container. So it takes the whole width of the body. And you have a menu, and since standalone applications on desktop platforms, excuse me a second, as I said, I'm pretty sick. Since standalone applications on desktop platforms have a menu, I'm reusing that menu to create the menu bar of my test window, okay? And because it's HTML5, it doesn't show in that example, but you could have multiple consecutive menu elements, and they would aggregate into one single menu bar, because it's one menu element only. Okay? So everything is parsed and reorganized to create the standalone application. You can see in that example that you have menus, sub-menus. For people familiar with OS X, you can see that the start, dictation, and special characters, special OS X menus do appear. Everything is here. So that's done through Qt. And as I said earlier, I want all of that to be dynamic. Okay? So let's imagine, this is a real example. It's a screenshot from a real example. You have 3 buttons in your UI, and you want to insert dynamically depending on a click somewhere, or a checkbox somewhere. You want to insert a text field. So I'm just creating another UI element. It's the second line, T equals document create element input. That's exactly similar to what you would do in a web page. Okay? I'm setting the attributes type equals text and value equals a text field. You would do exactly the same in a web page. I'm inserting that field in the page, but instead of inserting a field in a web page, it creates and insert a UI element into a native window, which is pretty cool, and Apple is enabled to do that with Swift, for instance. I think it's the only time it's feasible in native UI. So in terms of design and stuff I had to implement, that's a lot, unfortunately. So my goal, of course, is to be cross-platform for mobile and desktop, and it's 100% made in Haxe. Okay, everything is Haxe. I had a few issues, to say the least, with the HTML XML parser of Haxe. For instance, I had to implement entirely the namespaces handling, which is not supported right now, I think. And the XML parser is far too limited. I mean, it's usable for the configuration files of Haxe. It's not usable in general for generic XML files. I think the Haxe ecosystem would greatly benefit from a much better XML and even HTML5 parser. I had to implement entirely the CSS parser. So I already had one in JavaScript, which is I think the only CSS parser that is not based on regular expressions. I have a full Lexer. You have one? Okay, but mine is probably a little bit more complete. I'm dealing with absolutely everything, and it generates a DOM, so a CSS object model entirely. So I have to write that. It's pretty complete. It deals with shorthands. The whole CSS general syntax and grammar are implemented, and you have a full CSS object model in return when you pass something. I had to write also a CSS rendering engine, so I implement all of the cascade, all of the reflows. When you add an attribute to something in your tree, you have optimization to avoid reparsing and recascading everything. Basically, it is the CSS part of a layout engine of a browser, but without having to render a web page behind. Everything is implemented in full conformance to the standards, so HTML5, XML, and CSS. It's so true that I have error handling inside the code. So if you have an error, for instance, in your CSS, inside these examples, you have a log, you have a console log able to tell you that something is going wrong. So above Qt, how do I implement it? Above Qt, I have an HTML5 abstraction. You have a document tree, and in your struct, you have a direct connection to the Qt element, basically. So I'm avoiding too much overhead between the DOM tree of the HTML document and the real Qt element. It's pretty fast, actually. Everything is dynamic. As soon as you modify an attribute, you assign an inline style, you change the style sheet because you can even change the style sheet if you wish with the DOM. Everything is recomputed instantaneously and redisplayed instantaneously. For instance, if you have a... Thank you. If you're in, if in your native UI you have, for instance, a button, and you assign a behavior to that button on click, and if in that behavior you say that the button dot style dot border equals, I don't know, green thick solid, suddenly the border of the button will become green solid and thick. So it's absolutely instantaneous. You have a mapping between the Haxe classes and the DOM elements, of course. So basically you have only 2 layers, but you're mostly using 1. The environment is super lightweight. To build something, basically you have a macro, an operating system macro doing the Haxe compile lines, and that's all. There's absolutely nothing to do, and in seconds you have an application you're able to run. It's pretty trivial. So, but I have a few issues with Haxe, and so I hope you are not going to consider my words too badly, but there are a few things I want to tell you, and I want to tell you these things because I've been looking for investors for Quaxe, and it has been pretty difficult because of Haxe itself. And I want to explain you why, because I think there are some improvements we could implement altogether. So this is a real screenshot. If you go to Google Image and look for Haxe, this is what you get. I don't even understand why you get that, but it says something. Haxe is not the predominant search result in images, which is wrong. It should be number 1. So it says something about the publicity around Haxe, okay? Sorry, Nicolas, but the Haxe Foundation has a lot of issues. Its finances were unknown until yesterday, okay? You gave us a few figures yesterday, and one of them pretty shocked me. I was listening through the web. You said that the budget for last year was 60,000 euros, and from them, 62% were dedicated to software engineering. Okay, so that's a mere 37,000 euros to development, which is less than a yearly salary in France. Excuse me, but that's not a lot. That's not a lot. I know you can do better only if you have the budget for that, but it says a lot about stability. I was expecting that.
Yeah, regarding explanation. For financing, we haven't published yet because it's been only 2 years, so we will publish more regularly our figures as we go and communicate much more on the community about this. To be honest, we were quite busy in the first year to put everything in place. That's why we didn't do. As for the budget, I think you can't really compare because Haxe has been growing in the last 10 years with a zero budget because everything was made as open source software. Yeah. So you shouldn't see this as a total budget for what gets done into Haxe because that's not the truth. That's not how things work. It's just the things we are doing more than what we used to do it. And actually we I mean, you cannot really compare a company with an open source project in terms of budget.
No, Nicolas, I'm not.
I agree there are issues regarding communications and everything, and we talk about this at this conference with the involved parties and everything.
Again, don't take that as an attack. I'm only giving you not only the point of view, but the results of looking for an investor on a project based on Haxe.
I entirely agree with this. Yeah.
This is actually not coming from me. This is what an investor told me. So, I mean, the investor I presented the project to told me, who is Haxe? Who is the Haxe Foundation? Tell me about them. And there was almost nothing I could tell them. So, as soon as you have the foundation, when there's no foundation, there's no problem. Because they will not ask about it. But if the foundation exists, they want to know about the results, they want to know about the stability, they want to know about the customer base, they want to know about everything. And when there's nothing to show, it's a big issue. It's a very big issue. So your strategy about the future of Haxe, not in 10 years' time, but in 2 years' time, is still a little bit unclear. I'm trying to do something outside of the gaming community of Haxe, that is its original community. Because I think, I'm going to tell that in another slide, but I think this is one of the keys to Haxe's success. You have to go beyond the fences of gaming, otherwise it's not going to work long term. So you have to have a serious global strategy for the next 2 to 3 years. I mean, I'm sure this is shared by a company like TiVo. I mean, I've been working for the company, I know pretty well TiVo. I've been working a lot for the companies in the Bay Area. Okay, they're more interested in a corporate approach of that solution. They are not doing games. They are not doing websites. You are doing games, okay.
Sorry, so I'd rather talk for TiVo if that's okay. I understand the challenges I think that Nicholas faces. I appreciate your frank comments. I think it's great. I think open source brings something different to the game. Yeah. All I'll add to the conversation is, before Haxe, we were using Adobe Flash. They're a large company. They're very serious. Your investor probably liked them. I submit to you that maybe you had the wrong investor. Our experience is very, very good with this community. It may not, they may not have as much money in the bank as someone wants, but the passion and support has been great for us, and our investment is significantly more significant in our own people's time than these numbers would represent.
Yeah. So So I definitely agree with that, and I thought it was the investor. Unfortunately, this is a feedback from 5. So they all asked for a global report from the foundation, and I had almost nothing to show. So anyway, let's move forward a little bit. I looked for press releases about or from the Haxe Foundation, and we discussed that in the past once. None. I mean, in 2 years of existence, the Haxe Foundation has not released a single PR. Global PR all around the world costs 225 euros. So this is pretty affordable. Even the new releases of Haxe are not announced through a PR, which is entirely wrong. In 10 years, I found only one significant article about Haxe, and it's about TiVo and Haxe. I've not found another one. So there's a large field of improvement, to say the least, on that front. And again, the question of stability, if your budget is only 60k euros, is that enough to sustain more than one person on a permanent basis? Big issue. On my personal hand, Haxe CPP is a crucial component to what I'm doing. It's probably the most crucial component to what I'm doing. But you're alone almost on that. If I look at the comments on GitHub, you're almost alone. There's someone else. What's the contingency plan? I mean, if you're hit by a bus, I'm not wishing that, but if you're hit by a bus leaving this building, what's the fate of Haxe CPP? If Nicholas has a big issue tomorrow, what's the fate of Haxe? Sorry? Again, I'm looking at GitHub, and GitHub XCPP as one main contributor.
I know it's complicated, but if we want to stay on schedule, we have to keep the questions. I have something to say, but you know.
Yeah, probably best to keep the questions to the end. Okay, so as much as I love what you're doing, I mean, as the founder of a company, I have to ask myself, what happens if you disappear? Because I'll be in big trouble. So this is an issue. If people like me want to invest on Haxe and XCPP, what's going to happen? I mean, or if you find something even cooler than Haxe to invest on, and you go to another project, what's going to happen? And is it officially maintained by the Haxe Foundation or not? In the URL I pasted in that slide, XCPP is not mentioned. Yeah, but that's not clear. It is not clear. It's not clear. It's a core element of what's maintained by the foundation. So as I said, the community is wide and alive, but it's pretty loosely organized. I mean, if you take this event, it's organized by Silex Labs. Should be organized by Haxe Foundation. I mean, if there's a foundation about the technology called Haxe, that's the foundation's role to organize this event. Okay? And don't take it badly again, but after 10 years of existence of Haxe, there are 90 people in this room, worldwide. That's not a lot. I mean, jQuery is gathering conferences for thousands of people everywhere around the world. I think Haxe has the potential to do better than that.
Yeah. How?
How?
How? Yeah, you keep telling us nice things that don't.
Okay, no. Wait. So, yeah, I like this kind of comment. Say, you are pointing the finger at something, but you're not making suggestion. Before making suggestion, let's identify the issues. I'm identifying the issues. The solutions are always the same in the open source world. Communicate first. There's no communication at all. I'm sorry. It's non-existent. Again, I'm saying a PR costs 225 euros. Releases of Haxe are not even announced. I'm close enough to Bordeaux. I should have detected Haxe years and years ago. I'm a software developer. I'm writing applications, cross-platform application. I never heard of it. This is very surprising. If you do that, that will increase the visibility of the technology. Always. It's always like that. I'm sure there are companies who could consider using Haxe, but they never heard of it. They never read an article about it. I mean, I'm the co-chairman of the CSS working group. I've been involved in the HTML working group. I go to all web conferences around the world. I've never heard anyone mention, even once, Haxe.
Yeah, I get that, but I don't think making like 2 press releases is going to fix it.
It depends. I mean, you have a journalist here in Paris called...
Okay, there is one who wanted to come, and we didn't have, you know, the material to answer. But once again,
Yeah. So in Paris, for instance, you have Stephen Shankland, who is a senior editor at CNET. Okay, is highly interested in this kind of environments. But this kind of people work based on press releases and emails, direct emails to them. If you don't have press releases, forget it. I know, I mean, I'm in a free people company. Okay, we're free. We were free. And we increased the visibility of our own open source application up to 3.5 million users around the world, just doing that. If free people can do it, what can you do yourselves? Yes, you can. It's doable. I mean, I'm an old-timer in open source. I've done it several times. It only requires some organization. So I suggest a completely different way of doing about communication in the Haxe Foundation. I'm sorry. I think you should announce everything. The first press release will probably not be considered, sorry, because again, the journalists never heard of Haxe. But if you announce every release, if you announce every partnership, if you announce every new framework or stuff like that based on Haxe, it will gain momentum. And if you don't do it, it's not going to work. So the examples, I know these are huge examples, large organizations, but they started from usually only a handful of people and became worldwide known. I mean, jQuery was started by one single guy called John Resig. And jQuery is now a crucial element to most of the corporate websites of the world. Last jQuery conference on the East Coast of the US, there were 3,000 people for pay, and they even make money out of it, which is impressive. Xul at Mozilla was implemented by one single guy, Dave Hyatt, and he created a complete ecosystem out of it. I mean, 90%, if you use Firefox, 90% of the extensions you have on Firefox are written in Xul. Only the recent ones are written in HTML5. I know too well the guys from Qt at the time they started Trolltech. It's two guys in their garage, just like the Hewlett-Packard guys. They started something and it became a worldwide success. The number of corporations and software agencies using Qt on a daily basis is, I mean, hundreds of thousands or even millions. PhoneGap, bought by Adobe, was started by one guy, and communication helped. SAS is a CSS preprocessor, started on a napkin in a restaurant in San Francisco by 4 people, and it's ubiquitous on the web now. I'm saying that with little work, you can probably achieve the same. At least, I wouldn't understand if you don't do it. Okay. So my 2 cents, you don't communicate enough. You have to go beyond the fences of gaming, because I think this is the key to success for Haxe. The gaming community is wide. It's extremely powerful, but it's almost an isolated community in the software community. The people writing standalone software on desktop don't go to gaming conferences, and the people from gaming don't go to regular software conferences. There's a dichotomy here. So if you want to be more visible and offer a real ecosystem, you have to go beyond that. Haxe CPP is a cornerstone of that strategy. Seriously, I think that Haxe CPP is marvelous, just marvelous. It's the kind of things that can launch a complete ecosystem worldwide, and we have to capitalize on it because it's one opportunity in a lifetime. It doesn't happen often. And in my opinion, X plus XCPP, with or without a solution like Quaxe, because if I can identify that as a problem, I'm sure other people are going to identify that as a problem too. It could beat easily things like Adobe Air or Visual Studio or even Xcode. Because you won't have to use a visual builder. You won't have to learn Objective-C and its clumsy grammar. You won't have to learn C++. You will have to write HTML5 and Haxe code in a JavaScript manner. I mean, you put some Haxe inside an HTML5 document and you're done. You have a native app. You will build them all. Things I already said before because you asked me questions. Yeah, blah, blah. So the most important thing is the last item, to hear about Haxe or XCPP's future if Nicolas or you suddenly disappear, the contingency plan. This is something we currently discuss in the World Wide Web Consortium. What happens if Tim Berners-Lee retires or dies tomorrow? An organization, whatever its size, whatever its seriousness, cannot live normally without such a plan. It is mandatory, absolutely. Okay. So from the investor's point of view and from the founder CTO point of view, it's only to know if Haxe and XCPP are a reliable solution from an industrial point of view. Can I rely on this on a long-term basis? Am I sure that in 5 years from now, even if there's some technical divergence, can I be sure that Haxe and XCPP will still be around the corner and allowing me to write my application? Thank you very much.
Okay, so just I won't say anything about that, no comment, but just please consider that Daniel is really courageous to say that, and we don't want to hear that for sure. Wait, and he has a real background, so please stay constructive because it has to generate something very constructive.
Yeah, I'm not doing that to harm you guys. Yeah. I try to help here.
And we have only 5 to like 10, maybe, okay, let's say 15 minutes. So don't, stay constructive. He's a really interesting guy and you should listen to him. But, thanks.
That was a really, really annoying rant. And why it's so much annoying is because it's true, and I appreciate the feedback, and I really agree with most of the points you raised. We made the decision, maybe unconsciously, to focus on the technology first, before communication, because we are developers first. And in the world of startup, which I'm following also a bit, you get a lot of communication with poor products. And as we say, we have a very wonderful product, and I think everybody agrees on that. So we will fix the communication problem. We are working on this. Weeks ago, we hired someone to work on the communication issue for Haxe Foundation. So it's weeks ago, we're still in the process, we do PR, we are discussing this morning at the Haxe Foundation meeting with our partners to do joint PR with the main companies using Haxe about success stories and everything. So everything you say, we are aware about it, and we're working on it.
Good.
Regarding me getting hit by a car, which I don't wish to, but I actually rarely commit to the Haxe compiler anymore. I'm mainly managing the process and making sure everything goes. Of course, if I get hit by a car, it will, of course, need a bit Haxe, but I think the risk is just much more low than we have more contributors than it was years ago, okay? If that answers your question. So, yeah, I would wish maybe that you maybe write to me before that, because you have a lot of things to say, and I appreciate the feedback. Maybe we could have use your experience and use your feedback, you know, in a more interactive manner. That would be maybe also helpful to have you help in these issues. And it seems you seem to know quite well about different ways of who to contact. You're right that we have a closed community. That's right. And I think at some point every community is closed to itself. I mean, that's right. And I agree we need to go outside and talk, bring X outside of the X community. That's one of my main goals. We want to have Haxe people. If any of you want to give talks to actual developer conference or anything, we will make sure to list every one of you and have list all the conference and make the match. That means every time there is a conference near you, or you are okay to travel to a certain distance, X Foundation can pay for the travel expense and can bring you to all the conference in the world and make sure we spread the world. Okay? Does that answer part of the questions? Hopefully.
I have a question about Quaxe. This is probably a real simple, stupid question even, but just to confirm, you can use native apps inside of a Quaxe window? Like C++, Hex CPP?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, okay, cool. Yeah,
you can, okay. I have a library coming from an old contract I did for the French telco SFR long ago that does SIP, contact, and phoning. And I'm using it right now into a Quaxe-based application. Yeah, so is that your question?
Yes.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, you can link to Dilib, no problem.
Great.
A lot of comments on Twitter, so you should consider looking at them and interact with it, because everybody won't be able to speak. And yeah, I know. I'll give the mic to the the older and the most respected one. So I hope you will be nice.
Hi, I was wondering why exactly is it that you are so focused on Hex CPP? Like, for example, there is a pure C target and an LLVM target coming up. You could also use Hex JavaScript together with a couple of libraries that there are that allow you to build native UIs based on JavaScript runtimes. Why is it exactly Hex CPP?
Because I want to do native UI.
But you can do that in JavaScript, right?
Not really. Not really. It will never be as powerful as what
you're saying it's a performance.
You can do some UI. You will never be able to do all of the UI richness that one given platform offers. That's the issue.
Is that?
Because you don't have the hooks between the JavaScript layer and the system. So it's just
a matter of interfacing between the two languages.
Yeah.
All right.
CPP allows much more openness, I mean, with the system.
Okay.
That's all.
Hi, I had a go with the Quaxe thing.
Yeah.
Had a look. I wondered how I could get it to work in like OpenFL, or I actually tried Lux to see, but I managed to open it and it opens, but then obviously it uses a different system window. So I wondered if you'd looked at some of the frameworks to see how easy it is to integrate it, so that, for instance, if I want some SVG, which I think it renders, I can grab that from my application and use it in my application.
So there will be two ways to do that. The first one will come through Qt, because Qt has some helpers for that. And the second one of the controls inside, not Qt, because I'm not going to reuse the Qt one, I'm going to embed probably Mozilla Servo, inside Quaxe. So you will be able to create a real browser inside your native app, whatever the size of the control in your window, and you will be able to ask it to display SVG if you wish.
But specifically taking the example I tried with SnowKit and Lux,
Yeah.
you've got their system set up.
Yeah.
There's no easy way to mix them. They're like doing the Windows level.
I see what you mean. It's one of the issues I'm fighting with. I took a look at a lot of examples coming from the Haxe community in terms of gaming. Okay. Because I wanted to see what kind of UI you guys are using. And the short answer is you're not using UI. You are usually defining your own UI with very fancy buttons and fancy fonts and stuff like that, and scrolling things that are completely unusual in the world of application UI. And it's usually one frame buffer that is a container and you draw in. You don't create controls. So you have abstraction layers that allow you to create controls that are drawn. But it's extremely different from the way we create applications. And I don't see an intersection right now.
Well, I think quite a lot of people here will have played with Flash or worked in Flash industry.
Yeah.
So
don't ask me that. I'm totally not familiar with that.
In terms of creating custom Air applications. So I would say that the UI knowledge is probably quite high in the room.
Okay.
But it's not necessarily the same as the HTML ones.
Yeah, but don't forget, I'm using HTML here only as a description language. It's not creating an HTML document in anywhere. Yeah, you use the mic. Use the mic.
I think what you mean is combining it in either rendering OpenFL content, so to speak, inside of Quaxe, or the other way around. But I don't. Yeah.
So you can have a canvas element. So that's a frame buffer, a 2D or 3D. You can have a web browser, and you can use just like your web page. That's an element you can create. You can add to your native window. So imagine you want a native set of buttons or menu, a native menu with underneath exactly the kind of gaming window I've seen in all the demos. That is doable. And because it's Haxe, you will be able to use all the frameworks you guys use. It will build. It will work. But this is not my primary goal. It's going to work because Haxe makes it work, but it's not what I want to achieve.
I had another question. Is the CSS parser and the CSS DOM
Resolver
model, is that like a separate library? Could I
use absolutely. It's pretty well isolated.
Okay, awesome.
It's going to be open source, everything.
How are you planning on handling skinning and theming of components?
I can't hear you.
Oh, sorry. How are you planning on handling skinning and theming of components? Are you planning on something like Shadow DOM for implementing
CSS?
Just CSS? That's
everything. If you use all the power of CSS, I mean CSS3 and the recent modules of CSS, with backgrounds and borders, filters, shaders, everything, it's... For UI, it's enough. Largely enough.
Okay.
We can do a lot. Masking, compositing, stuff like that, we can do everything. And it's, just to give you one more technical hint, so Qt has a CSS-like language to style their UI, which is, I mean, again, I don't understand why they did that. It's close enough to CSS that it's easy to learn, but far enough from CSS that you cannot convert easily a CSS to that. It's not the same syntax and grammar, and I plan to do much better with that. I mean, whenever you set a style for a style sheet or another style in Quaxe, it will convert to the cutest stuff trivially.
So because you would be representing a slider, for example, with a single DOM element, how would you go about addressing the knob on that slider and styling that individually?
What? I'm sorry?
The handle on a slider, a value slider. How would you go about addressing that through CSS because it's sort of buried in the component?
That's a pseudo element. That's a pseudo element. We already do that in Zool. We have years of history about that.
So this question is not about Quaxe. Sorry. I want to talk about the other thing a little more. So first of all, I want to say thank you. I hope we get to have this discussion. It doesn't have to happen now, but I really appreciate your bravery to ask these questions. I just wanted to, maybe this is not completely a question. I apologize. I'll try to be short. Clearly at TiVo, we thought a lot about what it meant to embrace and switch our products to Hex before we did that. And I think I appreciate your questions, and I think they're well-founded. And on every point, Hex could be made better. And I encourage you to bring your experience and knowledge and continue to challenge us and offer opportunities. I think the challenge has been resources when I've observed it. But I'll also just say, from our perspective, when I looked at it, we could have picked up the technologies if one of them was abandoned or left or a key individual was gone. So I think for us that was part of the evaluation. The simplicity and the size of Hex is such that compared to the other investments we were making, we felt like we could get to where we needed to get. I understand your calculus may be different if you have 3 people. But again, thank you for your comments, and I'll appreciate any advice you have personally or in private or otherwise about how we make things better.
You know, making these slides was not easy. It's the first time I come to a meeting of the Haxe community, and I feel like a troll, seriously. But I'm a troll. I have a reputation of being a troll. But I really wanted to say what I had in mind because I care about Haxe and I want to use it for my own project. So I want to make it successful. So my point of view.
Okay, just I'm going to be fast, but just something I should probably say. What I'm going to say is obviously my own personal opinion. I do mostly agree with you, and thank you for doing this talk. And I'm sorry, I'm going to leave the Quaxe area and take it back to what I think is more important. So all this issue around communication, let's say it this way. Yeah, at first, then again, there's no journalist here, and that's not quite normal, because we've been spending 2 days here, or up to 4 for some people. There is probably a lot of money spent on food, organization, and all these things. And the goal of that shouldn't be for us to satisfy our egos by telling about what we're doing. If that's the only point, we can do it on the internet. We can send emails to the mailing list. If the only point is just to gather together, it is a very little point. So that's the first issue, I think. It shouldn't be too difficult to get journalists here, or at least student journalists, if you say that there will be food. So I'm fairly sure we can do that. The other thing, I've seen people trying to take this conversation offline. And I've got to say, as a dev, I'm not a CEO nor anything. I'm just a dev. Haxe is my job. I love Haxe. People know that. I've been publishing a book about it. I think we should applaud all the company who actually have taken the risk of using Haxe, and also all the devs, because that's a risk at the moment. And that's why I'm saying don't take that offline. Don't take it in a small group, because I'm doing Haxe. Haxe is my main job since more than 3 years. And at the moment, I've got to say that is a risk to me and to my career, a little bit. Because when I've got people calling me saying, well, we've got a position you may be interested in, but do you do, I don't know, knockout, do you do jQuery, do you do these things?
Yeah.
I can't say yes, and that's a risk to me.
So I have a story to share. Back in 2005, the famous French newspaper Le Monde, even you guys not from France know it, I guess, asked me and one of my colleagues to enter a war room during 2 days. And the question was a revamp of the whole back-end, editing back-end of Le Monde, okay? And in the end, after 2 days of chats, they had only one single question with a yes or no answer. Do you think we can use Mozilla Azul to re-implement entirely our backend? I repeat, 2005, okay? And the answer was yes, and it was a beta at that time. Because Zool was little known, it was still a little mature technology, not that much. And when I said yes, they looked at me and I said, okay, if you say yes, we go. And they re-implemented all of Le Monde's backend using Zool. There was a PR, and after that PR, most of the newspapers in North America came to visit Le Monde because of their backend, saying, wow, you guys have now 20 years of advance on us. And they started re-implementing everything. And some of them used Zool. So, this kind of stories.
So, say Le Monde, they need to use Haxe, please.
So that implementation of 2005 is now obsolete. So if you want to do this, first that's your call, and yes, it's the right time to do it.
Just a question about Quaxe. Any scripting capabilities or jQuery like access? You know, like be able to put some code like event handlers, like on click into the HTML.
Yeah. Everything will be doable.
It's working with using a script for that, maybe?
So, with what? I'm sorry?
You're using a script to put code in the HTML?
No. So, how many of you have heard of web components? Okay, a lot. So my take about web components is that it's a hacky, ugly, painful technology that should have never seen the light. It's a can of worms and it's a terrible mess. It's made by Google for Google to be used only inside Gmail, and I mean, implementation of web components everywhere is ugly. When we started discussing web components inside the World Wide Haxe Consortium, I had a proposal. So we have classes in JavaScript right now. We have classes in Haxe, and it's so easy to associate a given element in the DOM to a class. And that class can hold all the behaviors, all the on-click events, all the whatever you want, all the event handlers. So basically, I'm going to associate one DOM element to a class in my code, and that will handle all the behaviors.
Yeah, that's a bit less dynamic and less, you know, HTML5-like. So, well,
that's really componentization of your tree.
Yeah, yeah. Well, anyway, I agree. Yeah, and is it possible to do like? I mean, it's a bit similar because as soon as you can do code, maybe you can use like some kind of jQuery like selectors to perform the transitions and everything.
I don't understand what you
okay. Are you planning to have something like jQuery inside Quaxe?
Why would you do that?
To manipulate the UI, it's much more efficient to use jQuery than to use like DOM code. I mean, from my perspective.
Yeah, but again, jQuery is for web pages. I'm not planning to write web pages. I'm working on native UI. I mean, you are not going in an application to move a button like that. Nobody wants it. It's ugly UI. It never happens. If you do that, it's because you're an implementer of something in a car, and the buyer of a Porsche or a Mercedes wants a flying button, but someone normal will never implement a flying button. So you don't need jQuery.
Maybe slides, to slice content or something, you need to start.
Yeah, but then you have CSS animations.
Ah, that's right. I forgot about that.
If you have to use jQuery to fill the holes in your implementation and make sure that the method you are calling is going to run everywhere. But here, the CSS parser, the resolver, everything is my own. So, cross-platform, I don't have this issue.
Okay, we will take one last question. I'm sorry, if you have question, we will make a break, and you can make a line to ask your question to Daniel.
The question is about Quaxe. Did you implement also like the Flexbox?
For what? I'm sorry?
The CSS Flexbox?
Yes.
You have it implemented?
Yes. So it's not fully done because the Flexbox model is I mean, we changed it again 2 weeks ago in our meeting, CSS working group meeting in New York City. And some bits of the Flexbox model are a bit painful to implement, but yeah, eventually I will implement all of it. I will implement Flexbox, I will implement grids. Absolute positioning is a little bit difficult in UI because of stacking of native controls. But apart from that, you will have everything. The only main issue is floaters. To float something in UI, I'm not sure I want to allow that. And floats are already painful in the web page, so in UI, I'm not sure I want to work on this.
I mean, because Flexbox is so powerful when it comes to layouting and adjusting to the screen.
Flexbox is mandatory in UI. Okay, I don't know if you guys have worked on the on Motif or the Athena widget set long ago on Unix X10, X11. But Athena widget set and Motif, you could already flex in when was that? 89, 88? Okay, so flexing inside UI is, I mean, you cannot do without. Redistributing the spaces and extending a button, an element based on the global width, that's mandatory. Yes, so yes, Flexbox is an important part of it. Absolutely. Yes.
Thanks.
Thank you, Daniel. We're going to have a break.
Welcome to Gunship.